If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come, bring my spirits up. There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.
Welcome back to my coverage of the Kristen Smart trial, heading into week number 10, Monday, September 19th, 2022. Court was back in session after another unexpected delay last week. Court was only in session Monday and Tuesday last week, and then dark Wednesday through Friday. Rumor has it it's possibly a sick juror. I'm wondering, could it be the juror who's been struggling so much? If you haven't noticed, I like to guess these things. I don't assume, though. I'm just guessing. I have no basis for my guess other than emotional turmoil will very often manifest itself into physical illness. I'm sure in this high-paced, stressful world we live in, many of you can personally relate to this. I can definitely relate. Whoever it is, I hope they get well soon, and we can move on with the trial. And the judge is still confirming the trial is actually ahead of schedule. We've been at this trial for 10 weeks now. We've been waiting for justice for over 26 years. Let's remember the beginning. As we've continued through this process, and year after year of Paul hurting people, even before 1996, I'm choosing the word hurt, but we know the horrific details of the hurt he has caused. So let's refresh on this story, and for those of you not familiar, this will give you some better insight to what we're dealing with here. These clips will go into liar, liar, pants on fire, I like to call him Pinocchio Paul. They'll talk about the route that they supposedly took back to Cal Poly, which is the route Bobby just did in that recent episode, if you wanted to see that. It hasn't changed over the years, obviously. I feel like sometimes in the trial we forget about the victims, so I want to humanize Kristen again, and through the evidence and all this victim shaming and all the reminders, we need to remember this lovely girl was taken too soon, and she mattered. And I feel like she would have made a difference in this world. I've been emailing with one of our subscribers who's in another country but very attached to this case, and we both agree there's a depth to Kristen's soul.
He had a black eye. He had scratches.
Black eye, scratches. This is an actual picture of him with a black eye. Those of you who don't know Paul's mannerisms, etc., here he is, the liar, talking about how he started walking, and they even offered a lie detector test, which, of course, he declined.
I didn't think it would matter.
On June 19th, investigators bring Flores in for further questioning and confront him about his injuries.
How do we know that everything that you've told us so far isn't really the truth? How do we know now that you lied for us? Well, that wasn't important, though. Sure is. That's important.
Flores now tells investigators that he sustained the injuries when he hit his eye on his steering wheel while installing a car stereo. One aspect of Flores' story that doesn't change is the account of his last moments with Kristen.
I walked with her to where the driveway was, and I went up to my zone because the walkway goes that way towards my zone, and then she started walking that way.
Investigators have their doubts. They offer Flores a lie detector test, but he refuses. Still, it's not enough for investigators to charge Flores with any crime.
Now let's get back to Kristen and her graduation in the spring of '95, how she was setting her sights to go into the world. Her mom and her sister speak of her so fondly, and her dreams, and how close she was to them.
In the spring of 1995, Stockton, California native Kristen Smart graduates from Lincoln High School and sets her sights on a life filled with new people and new places.
Kristen was our family's adventure seeker. Anytime there was an adventure to be had, she was on the page and ready to jump in.
She wasn't a follower, she was a leader. She did what she loved, and she was passionate about whatever she did.
That fall, Kristen enrolls at Cal Poly State University in San Luis Obispo.
What were Kristen's hopes and dreams for the future?
Kristen had always been interested in architecture. But in another breath, she might tell you that she wanted to be Joan London and have the opportunity to interview a lot of interesting people and travel the world. No one could tell her that anything was impossible.
Even with a heavy course load and a full social calendar, Kristen never forgets to call home.
She called home every Sunday night. It wasn't in the cell phone era where you could just do that easily, but she wanted to talk to everybody.
Of course, she vanishes. Campus police drop the ball. Her dad has to go out and deal with flyers. And there's plenty of eyewitnesses. We've already heard from them. Her friends and her fellow students have already taken the stand earlier in the trial. My heart just breaks for her family and her friends, everybody that loves her. I know many of you are like me, where you feel so connected to her and you just don't know why. For some of us, it's also the battle of good and evil. The Floreses versus the Smarts. I've heard many, many people express this with me. We pray for justice and the return of her remains.
It appears Kristen Smart has vanished, but despite her mother's concerns, campus police are reluctant to file a missing persons report or start a formal search for Kristen.
The campus police believe that she may have simply taken a holiday and they thought that she was just traveling somewhere.
By Tuesday morning, there's still no word from Kristen. So Kristen's father, Stan, makes the 250-mile drive from the Smarts' home in Stockton to the Cal Poly campus. Once there, he persuades campus police to put up missing persons flyers. Officers also begin collecting eyewitness accounts from the night Kristen disappeared. Nearly all of them place Kristen on her way to fraternity
Row and the infamous party at Crandall Way, just off campus. Right out the gate, Chris Lambert is making the best of it. Good question, Chris. How can you be late for something when it doesn't start on time?
The Kristen Smart murder trial resumed today following a nearly week-long break.
So we're going to continue with direct examination of Angela Butler, the DNA analyst. And she started her testimony last week. Remember, last Monday, September 12, 2022. And then we had another unexpected delay.
Forensic DNA analyst Angela Butler was back in the stand.
The prosecution establishes that Butler has handled hundreds of cases over 20 years and performed thousands of tests. She is a bodily fluid expert. She's able to identify semen, blood, urine, saliva, and feces through testing. All of the results are confirmed by a second analyst. And then we find out later, even a third person signs off on it. He says, I take it the most complicated cases submitted to the lab are cold cases. And Butler explained how teams looked for unusual pieces of samples and found orange, brown, and other darker colors. Both presumptive and confirmatory tests were ran. Presumptive tests quickly determine blood or no blood. False positives are bluish.
Testified about a package received from SLO County Sheriff's Detective Clint Cole in March of 2021. The package contained what Butler described as, quote, damp, sandy soil. She says while inspecting the package, there were some very unusual pieces of soil in a variety of colors.
The soil used in the test came from 6 feet deep in the anomaly under Rubens' deck. And in order for the test to be confirmed positive, both tests must have positive results. The results are confirmed by a second analyst and reviewed by a third. Butler explains how she uses probabilistic genotyping software to analyze the DNA, especially degraded and mixed samples.
Butler described a test she did on some of the soil samples to test for blood and said all 6 samples came back with weak positive results for the test of blood.
Butler testified that in late April of 2021, the 42-inch by 26-inch section of the plywood floor of the trailer showed areas of brownish staining. All tests were negative for blood. She said a dime-size area passed preemptive tests for blood. Since it was such a small amount, she immediately did the DNA testing. The blue star area did not yield DNA. This explains some of the things I was wondering about when Sanger said to the previous witness about the blue star, did you know it wasn't blood? And she says, I was never told it wasn't blood. So this clarifies those statements now. Butler testified that she received a mattress cover. She did find DNA on the mattress pad with small brownish stains. The results were a DNA mixture. Mixture means more than one person's DNA. I'm not 100% sure, but I figure it's Paul's mattress cover from his dorm room. Here it even says, presumed that it was his. The DNA sample was from 3 people, at least one male. Paul and Kristen could not be included or excluded. Butler testified that she tested 9 areas of the mattress pad / cover. I've heard it referred to as both. She tested for touch DNA, such as skin cells or perspiration on the cover. Can I get a drum roll, please? Finally, blood confirmed on the mattress cover. Well, presumptive positive. You all who have stuck with me for the last 10 weeks, I'm sure have noticed how impatient I am and how I tend to jump ahead. It is one of my faults. I'm working on that. I was getting so upset that the media kept reporting that Paul's dorm mattress had blood on it, yet the testimony regarding the mattress itself never introduced any blood evidence at the time. I just had to wait until now for the mattress cover forensic results. Mattress cover, see, not the mattress itself. Can you blame me, though? I've been waiting for 26 years for justice. It's really, really, really hard to be patient. This trial seems like the home stretch. According to Judge O'Keefe and her estimates, will be done in a matter of weeks, after decades of stagnancy. Once we get 2 guilty verdicts with maximum sentences, we need to find Kristen and return her to her loved ones. Butler tested 9 total areas on the mattress cover. 8 had no positive results. 2 areas had too many contributors, and 6 excluded Paul and Kristen. The machine she uses can only handle a maximum of 4 contributors. 11A marked a small brownish stain. Surprisingly, Butler testified that ferret blood could also react and cause a false positive. A few jurors looked at each other when that statement was made. According to witnesses, up until now, no ferret or primate remains have been found anywhere on the property, and definitely not in the anomaly where it's expected Kristen's remains laid before they were relocated. Butler explains the HemDirect test she used in this case. The test detects hemoglobin, the protein that gives blood its red pigment. It specifically reacts to human hemoglobin and higher primates. It cannot differentiate. Butler explains the clumps had fibers embedded in them. She collected them and put them on gel lifts with tweezers, preparing for trace examination. Most jurors are writing in their notepads at this time. She explains that she put pieces of soil in small tubes and extracted them in distilled sterile water. She wanted the color in the solution to release. The process leaves sand in the bottom of the tube. The colored liquid is distilled for confirmatory tests for blood. She describes a HemDirect confirmatory test. They look like a COVID test or a pregnancy test, she describes. The upper soil sample had a weak positive in the presumptive testing, but was negative with the HemDirect testing, which means no hemoglobin was detected in the upper soil sample.
Butler added, however, that she was unable to extract any DNA from the samples, telling the court that while DNA lasts decades under pristine conditions, if not stored correctly, you may not get any results.
The cargo trailer floor, the plywood in particular, was tested for DNA as well, and none of Kristen or Paul's DNA was found. Mike McConville's DNA was found. That's Susan's long-term boyfriend, all the while that she's married to Reuben, by the way. Mike is accused of helping remove Kristen along with Reuben and Susan both, but no charges so far for Mike or Susan. When you realize Reuben is accused of helping Paul conceal Kristen's remains, accessory after the fact, and he only faces 3 years maximum when he's found guilty, Mike and Susan would probably just get community service for their suspected roles. In the justice system, that's just not worth it, unfortunately. I'm sure civil lawsuits will move forward. The Smarts have filed civil lawsuits against the Flores family, just wanting answers, hopefully, which they didn't get. And the Flores family sued the Smarts because they are sick in the head, warped and demented, in my opinion. Well, now I know my Perry Mason moment from the previous episode would have flopped when this testimony was heard by the jury. It leaves some reasonable doubt for sure regarding the DNA evidence in the cargo trailer. We always want it to be like TV and the movies, and I know, guys, it's not really that way. Just dreaming. Testing on deeper soil from the hole under Rubens' deck showed 1 negative, 2 weak positives, 3 positives with the HemDirect confirmatory test. This explains part of my confusion. There was a mistake originally on the numbers and I couldn't keep track. So that's the correction there in the black background screen. She testified that, quote, "I've confirmed the presence of human blood on all of these samples except the one." Prosecution asked if the second forensic DNA analyst confirmed and initialed the test results. Sanger, objection, hearsay, overruled. And then Butler answered yes. Butler said, quote, "I can confirm the presence of human blood on all these samples except for the one." Here are the 3 slides. She explains the process. Spinning samples at very high rates of speed in a centrifuge. The cells present go to the bottom. A buffer of enzymes and a liquid is added that would rupture cells to release DNA. No DNA was found in any of these samples. The prosecution asked how human hemoglobin could be absent of DNA. Butler explains that time and other inhibitors in the soil that degrade DNA, like bacteria and microbes, they don't get along well with DNA. On April 27, 2021, Butler received a second package from the SLO Sheriff's Office with control samples from soil collected at Rubens' property. They were from various spots on the property, and all control samples were negative for human blood. That same batch from April 2021 included 4 more samples from the hole under Rubens' deck. Results were 2 additional positives and 2 weak positives. More fibers were also collected. Butler testified that she put the fibers on gel lifts, packaged, sealed them, and notified Detective Cole to pick them up. He got them from her May 26th of 2021. Butler described further testing from March of 2021, the soil samples of the 5 new samples. 1 was negative, 3 were weak positives, 1 was positive for presence of human blood. The prosecution asked, question, what color were fibers found in sample C1? Answer, red, black, some clear, and some white. Question, sample B3, some red and some blue. Question, were fibers in the soil sample from probe B? Answer, yes, some red, some what we call dark because she couldn't even tell the color. Question, how many total samples tested positive for human blood? She answered, as she counted, and she says, 13. I feel the power of this evidence. Do you guys? The ferret blood testimony could be problematic, but there's no carcass or bones or fur or anything else found. We know the jurors were intently listening and even reacted to that testimony. Let's think about it. Ferret blood. How likely is it?
And after the court was shown various photos to help explain how the tests work, prosecutor Christopher Puvrell asked what the significance of the results were to Butler, and she replied, quote, "As far as the conclusions I can draw, I have confirmed the presence of human blood in these samples."
I had to chuckle a little bit when she was stuttering and stammering over Chris's name. I've noticed his name is tough and pronounced all different ways. It's even tough for me sometimes as well. It's weird how we feel better when someone else struggles the same as we do. Human nature's so weird. I must say, I do really like the blue suit he's wearing today. Sometimes he's quite the sharp-dressed man. All right, time for cross-examination with Singer. He started off by rehashing the soil samples. Singer presented personal logs to Butler, and he asked if she tested the pH levels of the samples, and she said she did not. Butler said the pH test was not required, but usually a neutral pH is what she wants, close to water, basically. Ready for Singer? His egg on your face segment? It's been a minute since I called him out on that. This one I just can't resist. Singer continues to challenge Butler on the soil, the pH level. He asked if she's aware on the literature from the test's manufacturer, Serotech, that it says pH lower than 5 could yield false positives. Butler answers with full confidence and says she's aware, but noted 5 is, quote, basically battery acid, end quote. This testimony is a little confusing in my opinion. I wonder how the jurors are holding up. I haven't heard about any jury questions. Singer confirms test results from soil samples with her and pointed out that all soil samples tested in 2022 found negative results for human blood. Side note, I expect to hear about all that in redirect. Singer shows Butler a list of materials she tested that he had typed up. She said it looked correct, but she needed more time to review to be comfortable with the list. Singer asked the court clerk to make copies of Butler's actual logs instead. The clerk leaves to get copies, and Singer starts several lines of questioning that he doesn't complete, and then he says, quote, "I can hear the machine whirring in the hall. Not murmuring, whirring with a W." I'm sorry, that was awkward. He's never prepared. It's annoying in my opinion. The nerve to object all the time on consumption of court's time when he has wasted plenty of time due to his lack of organization, in my opinion. Next question by Singer. Do you know a forensic doctor named Elizabeth Johnson? She has a PhD. Answer, I do. Objection, relevance. Wow, today has been pretty light on objections. I just realized that. It's been nice. Sustained. Singer says, quote, Your Honor. And he does one of his long silent stares. And he says, so we don't have to call her back? Singer publishes Butler's log. Singer is being a weirdo, in my opinion. Before I explain further, remember the end of last week when Singer was called out again for his extra aggressive questioning and how jurors were having issues with it? One juror in particular. I was noticing he seems like he's trying to be less aggressive today. I wasn't even going to mention it, but this reiterates my feelings. He points out some of her items say RMS. He says, those are my initials. What does that stand for? Butler answers, that's how the lab designates the evidence locker. Singer says, so you named an evidence locker after me? Thank you. And he actually even says, that was a joke. It seems like he's almost acting like me sick today, maybe trying a little too hard. I don't know. Singer asked about him direct recommendations for using their proprietary buffer. Sanger wants to know about using distilled water in the process. Butler explains that it's not just a recommend, it's a requirement. The next question was, so you use distilled water to dilute samples before testing? Answer, no. I used distilled water to extract the samples, then I diluted them with the Hem-Direct buffer solution. Question, on July 14th, 2021, you analyzed items 40, 41, 44, and 45. She answers, yes. Question, and some did not test positive for human blood. Answer, correct. Of 11 tests, 8 were positive for human blood, 3 were negative. It's weird how Sanger acts like he studies these manuals, yet his questions seem off, in my opinion. He talks about how 10 minutes is the wait time for a test reaction, and he accuses Butler of waiting more than 10 minutes. She says, no, in a confused tone. And he says, you didn't? And she says, no. And then Sanger says, oh. It's just weird. To me, it's just such weak attempts at reasonable doubt. I have to admit it, Sanger did actually earn some points when he was establishing that the test was not validated for use in soil. That's not good in my opinion. Next question. With the mattress cover, sample 11A had the same background as the other samples, correct? Objection, vague, overruled. The judge says, you may answer if you understand the question. Butler says, I don't understand the question. Sanger says, that's okay. The judge excused the jurors for lunch and announces to return at 1:15 p.m. because court ends at 2 p.m. today. After lunch, Sanger attempts to admit several exhibits regarding alleles, or alleles, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, I'm sorry. Here it is here, though. And electropherograms. There's some hard words in some of these, man. The judge asked if there's any objections, and the prosecution says not to admitting, but I would object to publishing some of them. The judge calls for a sidebar. That lasts until 1:40 p.m. And then after the sidebar, Sanger publishes the electropherogram for sample 11A from the canvas mattress cover and explains that DNA and alleles, occasionally asking Butler if that was correct, as he's explained what they are. It's some type of DNA sequencing, basically. That should be confusing enough for the reasonable doubt, right? Court adjourned at 2 p.m. on Monday. It seemed like so much longer. 2 hours early because they went through court exhibits, according to Judge Jennifer O'Keefe. Butler's expected to continue her testimony Tuesday morning, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is due to how ill-prepared Sanger continues to be. I'm selfish, though, so I appreciate it when he's bumbling. Outside of the jurors' presence, attorneys spent the next 2 hours going through all the exhibits that had been admitted, preparing them to be available for the jury after both sides rest. Ooh, are we getting close? Do you think Sanger will present much on his own case or rely on trying to mess up the prosecution's case? So many questions. By 3:40, the prosecution's exhibits were completed, and the defense was still not prepared. Imagine that. Is anyone surprised? I'm not. After a 22-minute break to sort it out, the judge excused the court reporter and the media. Side note, remember the previous episode regarding the Parkland judge, Elizabeth Scherer, I believe is how you pronounce it? Well, the defense filed a motion and she refused to recuse herself from the trial. And I guess this is footing for possible mistrial. The jury's not present anyway, so I feel like she was appropriate, all things considered, personally. Politically correctness just goes a little too far sometimes, and respect goes both ways. The defense attorneys do also strategically create appellate issues, in my opinion. And I like this judge. Let's hear from some of the experts about this.
I think the trial is going to continue. I think the judge is going to be more on her P's and Q's. I think she's going to adhere more to court decorum because they're calling her out on it. It's public, and she knows that this is going to be a ground for appeal. So I think that she's going to be less hair flipping, less eye rolling and neck rolling, and be a little more professional about it.
What's truly critical is not what happens at a sidebar or not what happens when the jury is excused. What's truly critical is if there's something that happens that the jury sees. The jury is the fact finder of first resort in this case, subject to review by the trial court judge. And obviously the defense is not going to get any help from the trial court judge in this particular case. But the jury is the fact finder. These are non-lawyers, and they're seen, right, wrong, or indifferent, as being more impressionable than lawyers or judges. And for that reason, it's really what happens in front of the jury that matters.
As we're getting closer to the end of the trial, I think more and more and more about Kristen and her life. And it just makes me so, so very sad. I pray she gets the justice she deserves.
If I can't keep my head held high enough, I'll just speak love and watch the smiles come.
Thanks for watching.
Bring my spirits up.
Don't forget to stop and smell the flowers.
There's some shit I like to fix, but I still know that I'm blessed.